Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our practice edition where we take lean improvements made throughout the week and tie them back to lean principles. This is episode 121. I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda Cards.
And I am Devin Bedoni of Lichen Precision. And our quote for this episode: high production efficiency has been maintained by preventing the recurrence of defective products, operational mistakes, and accidents, and by incorporating workers' ideas. All of this is possible because of the inconspicuous standard worksheet. Taiichi Ohno.
So another greatly under, we haven't done enough of this in our shop, are SOPs and standards that actually get worked to.
Underutilized.
Yeah, there we go. And I think this is really starting to hit home for me because of our increased use of Kanban, and specifically with Arda, because I'm noticing that anytime we have an issue with procurement or with what ends up getting delivered, like not fitting on the shelf or whatever, we actually jump back in and make a fix. Mm-hmm. And it's highlighted to me how there isn't a landing place for all of that information and learning in the rest of our operation.
Yeah.
So we often have conversations, and I'm just noticing them more and more, where it's like, oh man, this happened. And it's like, oh, well, do you know why? It's like, well, I think because of this. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, now we know that. But like, it's not written down anywhere. It isn't it is going to only help improve things if we keep it in mind. Yeah. And I know that we won't kind of forever until we relearn that same lesson again later.
Yeah.
And so it's just making me see how much room there is for improvement on that front at Austere.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. We have a long way to go. I as you were speaking, I was realizing I haven't thought about it this way, but the fact that we started to document setups has been a similar thing, where now on a repeat job, when it comes back around, like the initial drive, right, is, well, when it comes back around, you know how to do it again without having to go figure it all out again, which is obviously a benefit. But a not insignificant benefit has been that every time it does come back around, often we're making edits to that setup sheet, adding information, creating better clarity, or like, as is often the case recently, as we revamp our tool library, making edits to the tool list so that it matches our new system. It gives us a place to do that instead of just repeatedly being confused.
Yeah.
It's been pretty cool.
It's super cool. And I think like now you have a place to do that for setups, and then it's kind of like, well, there's a lot of stuff in this business that isn't setups.
Yeah.
And I'm just noticing for us how much.
Yeah. We do lean pretty hard on our SOPs tab and Airtable.
You mentioned that, and I've been thinking about.
Yeah. And it's very what's the word? Unimpressive in terms of, like, it's not flashy in any way whatsoever. And many of these things are in there are like, this could use work.
Sure.
Simultaneously, like, yeah. On a relatively, like, almost on a daily basis, it's like I find myself using it, or someone comes and asks me this question. I'm like, I think it's this. Let's look. Oh, here it is in this thing. This is. I really need to do that. And I don't think this is just an Airtable thing. Like, I think you could do it many different ways and have it function. It's really just about, like,
having a single source of truth is probably the biggest.
I mean, it could just be like a note card holder with a bunch of note cards in it. Like, It doesn't have to be fancy in any way whatsoever.
Right.
Just has to be low friction. I think honestly that's been the biggest, like, come up with that whole system, is that it's extremely low friction to make a new one.
Yeah. And I would also guess that the more you're using it across your shop, the easier it is to jump into, right? Like, if it was another system that was somewhere else and you only access it when you want to make edits, it would be kind of annoying. But you're in it to look at how to set up the machine. You may as well make edits to that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I want more of that.
Give me more.
Yeah.
Should we jump into some improvements?
Yeah.
I realize too, we need to do maybe a little better job of actually tying them back to lean principles as usual.
Yep.
Reminder. We had kind of a cool one. I spoke about it on the last episode, how with our job board, we're trying to surface different types of information. And one thing that we've had a big challenge surfacing is simultaneously displaying state and urgency.
Okay.
And my brother's been working it with us for the summer, like filling in. He's a teacher, so his summer's off.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a really good idea, which was, and he implemented this. Actually, I think everything here this week I didn't do. He just
you could list that as an improvement.
That's an improvement. Yeah. He put red electrical tape lines across each lane. So effectively each lane has like a standard area and a red urgent area. And so things kind of just march through in their sequence that shows state. Mm-hmm. But if there is urgency due date, you can just magnet it above the red line or
That's
on
awesome.
the red line. And now it is surfaced to everybody that this particular job has higher urgency.
That's super cool.
Yeah. And it's definitely like, it's binary, right? There's like urgent, not urgent. It's not like incredibly granular.
Sure.
But it's twice as granular as it was before.
100% improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting. I think the lean principles, one would be just visual production, right? Like at a glance, you know the state or what's urgent.
Yeah.
Something that made me think as you're saying it is that I think I often look for solutions that are sort of automatic. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, how can we make it inherent in how the system operates that it will surface things that are urgent?
Yeah.
But
which is a great goal.
It's a good goal, but I think as long as I don't let it slow down making incremental steps. And I think also I'm thinking of Shigeo Shingo talking about the machine, like taking parts out of the scrap.
Oh yeah.
On the line, they had two people doing it. He asked, why aren't you having a machine do it? It's like, well, it didn't do a perfect job. And it actually did an 80% perfect job.
Right.
And so he's like, okay, machine plus one person, way better than two people.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think there's probably a lot of room to do there's a great essay by Mr. Graham in the startup world called Do Things That Don't Scale. And it's actually for exactly the same reason that this is useful, is like, now once you have that urgent, non-urgent, it puts you in a position to learn a lot more about what you need as the next improvement, right? Like maybe you need another gradient.
Right.
Maybe you need, and
yeah, we discussed that actually. And we're like, well, let's just start with 2 and see what happens.
And the automation piece is way easier to figure out once you have a very good handle on which parts are annoying, which only happens when you're doing it in sort of a manual way. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that is all to say that I think I sometimes miss opportunities for improvements because I'm like somewhat like reluctant to just do things manually. And in the Toyota way, they were actually talking about like that every day someone loads the Heijunka board. They load all the cards into it. Like that's a super manual process, right? And there is this sorting activity. And actually Miguel, who I've been working with, was describing MRPs and how changes in the shop plan are significantly disruptive. Like when you have a rush job, it's a huge problem.
Yeah. And
as opposed to walking over to a board and moving some pieces of paper around.
Right.
I think part of having this set point of like, of course we're using Kanban, of course we're using pull, it's lost on me how efficient that already is. Mm-hmm. So like that highly manual process is actually hugely worthwhile.
Right. Yeah. Like you look at it and you're like, this is a highly manual process. That seems crazy. Right. But then you're like, in context of the efficiency gains that come from that, it's just like water under the bridge.
Yeah, and like sure you can improve it, but
yeah.
And also now that I'm saying that I think somehow the act of sitting in a chair behind a computer working on something that's theoretically really powerful, there's something very appealing about that.
Right. It doesn't seem like a highly manual process, but it's actually like,
yeah. And especially when you look at the results, if they're worse than the really manual process. Someone texted me, a friend of mine texted me asking about project management solutions, and she was like, I haven't found any. I keep coming back to Apple Notes because I haven't found another system that puts out more than I'm putting in. And that is such a good line.
Interesting. Yeah.
A lot of them don't. A lot of them promise to, but a lot of stuff doesn't. Yeah. And then people end up using it in like a really barbaric kind of stripped down way. And you're kind of like, why are you using that complicated tool for super basic?
Well, because this one has metrics.
Well, we had a very funny conversation with someone about ERPs and MRPs related to Arda. And they're kind of like, well, does it do this? Does it do that? And we're like, no, it specifically doesn't. Like planning and and like all this, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it does some planning and forecasting, but in a weird way.
Yeah.
And they're in the same sentence saying how powerful those tools were. And then basically like, but they never work because the system's never right. And then you're typing, you're overriding it. And we're like, right. So like, it's not that, anyway, not that good. I have a really dumb one.
Love it. Give me a dumb one.
There were electrical cables for 2 machines that were sort of dangling down where the bins are stored for the inventory for our buffer in front of paint.
Yeah.
I added a screw so they're hung up out of the way. That's my improvement.
What lean principle are we coming back to there?
Well, the bins sometimes fall on the floor, which isn't fully fixed, but this was a big fix. I guess probably wasted motion if they fall over processing.
Plus potential defects.
Yeah. Yep. I posted us on the Arda.cards Instagram. I posted in the stories a video of someone picking up a bunch of pallets and then doing some fancy maneuver and dumping them all on the ground. And it's like, it's so common to order extra stuff or something, and then you're shuffling them around and you drop a bunch on the floor and then you're like cleaning them off.
Yeah.
So yeah, the bins definitely rejects. Let's see. We have overproduction, overprocessing, excess inventory, defects, transportation, wasted motion, waiting, wasted human potential. So definitely wasted human potential. Also, in reading out those, it's a little bit silly based on our last episode that those are the things we're going to evaluate all of our improvements based on.
Sure.
That is Mura. I always forget which one. It's Mura, Muri, and Muda. I think it's Muda is straight up waste, right?
Right. Muda.
And then Mura is fluctuation.
Muda, wastefulness, uselessness, and futility. Mura is unevenness, non-uniformity.
And Muri is overburden.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think it relates to those. That's a pretty small.
Right.
Solidly in the Muda category.
I think more like not necessarily like looping back to lean wastes, but looping back to lean principles is helpful.
Yeah. Maybe we should, as an improvement to the podcast, put together a more robust like cheat sheet for
principles.
Yeah, that we come back to over and over. It can be our standard that we continually update.
Should we start it right now so that we have low friction?
Perfect.
Yeah. I don't know if this really, I mean, it kind of counts. I ordered a new computer for myself, which I vacillated about writing it down here. The reason I did it is it's not strictly necessary. I don't actually really want a new computer. But it just occurred to me that the downside risk of not having a new computer, if my current computer got to the point of it's not functioning anymore, it's a lot more money than what a computer costs.
Yeah. Like downtime for a day or something.
Yeah, downtime specifically for me for a day.
Right.
And like
On programming.
there are other computers in the shop. Like I could probably make it work, but it would be extremely disruptive.
Yeah.
So, and this computer is getting a little long in the tooth, and it started acting a little funny every once in a while. And I could work on troubleshooting, fixing, etc. But as this needed to happen at some point anyway, just went ahead and did that. So yeah, that was the kind of the underlying principle was.
What is the principle?
I think
I wanted a new computer. No, specifically not that.
Yeah. What is the principle?
I mean, it's like disruption.
Yeah. Unevenness, really. It comes down to
unevenness across the shop is hugely problematic and
Yeah.
would be caused by that.
Yeah. And it just seemed like a silly thing not
Yeah.
to just deal with.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mentioned this last episode, but an improvement for Arda has been working on a white paper to explain pull versus push.
Yeah. It does seem like that is a key part of your business is really education, unfortunately.
We're really trying to make it not that, but at least for investors it is.
Yeah.
Because
right.
Yeah. Like if you come in and say like most of the world is doing it wrong, they're like, okay, I'm going to need more on that. Do you have anything to cite there? So this is sort of a roll up of that.
Nice. Right.
Lean principles there, I guess. I mean, it's somewhat repetitive, right? So that's sort of, I mean, it's sort of wasted motion, but it's not really.
The standardization.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're standardizing the
answering of that question.
Yeah. Or also just like, you're also like creating a place in which your working theory, as it were, is documented and can be improved upon. That's not just in your head.
Right. True. Yeah. You can make edits as you get more questions. You can refine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two things that popped into my head that probably belong in last week's episode, but I'm just gonna drop them randomly here. One is on the topic of production leveling.
Mm-hmm.
The more we've talked a lot about in-house versus sending stuff out.
Yeah.
The more processes you have to level across.
Yeah.
The more processes you have to level across.
Yeah.
So like bringing stuff in-house suddenly enables you to fill in downtime, and it gives you another thing to level things across. So
yeah,
kind of handy. Adjacent with that, and what reminded me with that last improvement is I've increased again my advertising spend. And it's getting to the point where it can pay for a significant amount of someone's work per day.
Yeah.
Like not a full-time position by any means. And that's sort of my idea, is to sort of compare the two. But I think it would be easy to do a straight one-to-one comparison of like, can I drive the same amount of revenue to the business through AdWords or, whatever advertising methods?
Yeah.
Or through hiring someone. And there's an added layer that just popped into my head today, which is bringing that knowledge in-house, right? Like if I pay Meta to push this thing through some tricky algorithm to people and it's effective, that's awesome. And it's a great tool to have in the tool chest. If we're refining how we create content and we're deepening our understanding of what resonates with our customers, etc., that feels more powerful long-term than an algorithm, especially once you consider that we have no control over that algorithm.
Yeah. Also with the kind of like you don't have a feedback loop with the algorithm in the same way. Yeah. Right. Like where you do have a serious feedback loop where you're like, okay, we changed this one specific thing.
Totally.
We saw what happened. That is the market directly speaking to us versus saying the market responded to us when we spent more on this one thing, but we don't really know why aside from spending more. Yeah.
And there's stuff you can do with A/B testing, etc. And we're not that sophisticated at the moment. Anyway, just thought I'd mention those.
Yeah. I think several weeks ago when we were talking about in-house versus out-of-house and stability, I think that kind of comes down to it. Or that's sort of what I was trying to get at, is when your production is reliable and your demand is reliable, it is very easy to have your to minimize the number of things you do in-house and rely on your upstream vendors or your downstream, whatever. The whole chain becomes more reliable.
Yep.
But given that it is not consistent, like in any case, and you have to level, right? Like the more you can do in-house. And I think as it becomes more and more volatile, certain things need to be done in-house in order to just maintain basics.
I think that's correct, but there's a few assumptions that are worth unpacking, which are, we've read some case studies around increased production by continuing Kanban up and down the supply chain.
Yeah.
And so in-house isn't actually what you need to optimize for, right? It's sort of that true linking of a pull system deeper into your supply chain. And the more you can do that, the more it will, I mean, as I think it was Taichi Ono talks about building in a nervous system into an organization. And the problem is that we sever those nerves between organizations. Yeah. Not exactly. We pass large chunks of information.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it requires
those two can be
a relationship with your suppliers that is willing to be permeated and affected by your demand. More than just like, hey, we want this. How soon can we get it?
Right. And it's very, anyway, that's a long conversation.
It is. Yeah. We got Arda populated to our tool cabinet.
Very cool.
And inventoried, got an actual inventory of tools that we have on hand. So like, because this has been a rolling process and there have been Kanban cards in circulation between two different systems, we didn't have a good sense of like what was actually triggered and what was not.
Gotcha. So you don't have a real inventory, but you have a true sense of triggered versus not. Like you don't know we have 3 of these and 7 of those. And
no.
Okay.
We have a below and above trigger point.
Yep.
Which is all we really care about. I don't really.
As you should.
Yeah. Don't need to know beyond that. And also there was a lot of like tool ID sort of, what's the word?
Like correction or something?
Yeah. Like dupe. Yeah. What's the word for that?
I don't know.
Anyway, an audit, tool ID audit.
Yeah.
So we don't have duplicates or missing numbers anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I talked to a bakery about, this was not an improvement. Talked to a bakery. I was asking them about how they do inventory.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we just walk around and compare everything to par sheets for each vendor. And it only takes us 10 or 15 minutes per vendor.
Par sheets? What's that?
So I think par is basically like, how much do we want to have on hand? And do we have below that? I would guess. And then that starts to tell you what you should order.
Sure.
And so I was like, oh, are you happy with that amount of time? She was like, yeah. It's like, okay. Have a great day. No. I realized what I should have said was like, and then what's your ordering process? Because that's like once you gather that information, there's probably an inefficiency there. But it was funny to me. It's just bizarre to me when you run into people that don't want to improve things. And I guess it's hard to discern when someone's trying to sell you stuff, but just not even me trying to sell Arda. Across the board, it is interesting how many people you start telling about like lean and they're kind of like, meh.
Yeah.
You're like, really? You don't want to? No? Okay. Anyway.
30% better? Not for you? All right.
Yeah, exactly. So we made, Sam made new machining cards.
Kanban cards?
The Kanban cards for our machining loop, added more visuals, I think I mentioned this last episode, but a QR code to take us to a QC.
No, I don't think you did.
SOP.
Okay.
And sort of like document to track changes and stuff we've made.
So like after the parts are done, you can scan that and it'll go through your QC process?
Yeah. That's the idea.
Cool.
More images, more color coding, etc. So that it's definitely not it's not better yet, I think, but it is a big step in the right direction. That big step broke some stuff, but
What
it's
did it
nice
break,
to have
really?
movement. It broke some stuff in Arda just
Oh.
because of the implementation wasn't sort of like, we didn't talk it through enough to sort of figure out what it would affect, and we fixed it easily because it has a easy like version control thing. But it broke some stuff there
Because you were adding new QR codes and new features to
exactly.
it. Okay, gotcha.
And then also just I haven't used it fully, and we haven't we don't have a scanner, etc.
Yeah.
So, but it's nice. We've talked about having standard like an SOP for our QC process for each part we make for years. So it's very cool to actually have some movement there.
Yeah. Side question. Do you have like a whole section of Arda, or a whole section of your in Coda?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a whole section in Coda for running your business that's separate from Arda?
Sam started to build one.
Okay. Yeah.
I haven't
This
engaged
seems
with
like
it fully.
potentially a good place where you could just have something completely separate. That's like we generate a sticker that links to our QA QC that you just
Too many acronyms.
stick on your card. That's like not needing to make this like crazy link necessarily until you're sure that it's a good thing.
I think there's some merit to that. I think there's also some merit to us building that capability into Arda
For sure.
because you needed that. We may need that. Like a lot of businesses already have other systems that may be good to link to, and maybe we should sort of think proactively about that linking process.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I like what you're saying. ¿Por qué no los dos? No, I don't know what that looks like. Anyway.
We started, as I spoiled, a Kamishibai board. I didn't actually do any of it yet, and I haven't really interacted with it.
Okay.
There's a bunch of things I would have personally done differently, but it's also super cool, and it exists.
Yeah.
So that is a major improvement.
That's awesome.
And right now we're just doing daily, weekly, monthly tasks.
Okay.
And not doing any kind of like breakout based on that's actually not true. They made some little stickers you can put with people's names. So if you want to assign something.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then we're only using it right now for like standard repeat stuff. So no development processes or anything. So
that's a good line.
We'll see how it goes.
It's about a line in the sand.
Yeah. Got to draw it somewhere.
Nice. We added a tray for moving things up and down the stairs.
Cool.
Which definitely falls into the category of polishing a turd, but here we are.
So what does that look like? What do you mean exactly?
Yeah, so we carry parts. Our paint is upstairs.
Yep.
And so we carry like sandblasted parts up, and then QC'd parts, painted parts down.
Yeah.
And we were sort of like gathering a bunch of bins of small precious parts in our arms and then walking up and down stairs with them, and that mostly goes well.
You can see where that ends up sometimes.
Yeah, so I would say that one is rejects are the big one we're trying to eliminate.
So do you have like a tray holder at the bottom of the stairs, and then you just...
We're not quite that fancy quite yet.
Okay.
So it's not really designated how it gets moved, when it gets moved, where it lives. We don't have multiples. We literally took a tray that we already had, and we're like, let's use this to move things up and down. And so it's typically somewhere. And there's two places where it typically lands, like one upstairs, one downstairs. But I think, that's kind of next is codifying that process to some degree.
How do you move things around other parts of the shop?
We are not batching as much in other parts. So like
single bins.
Mostly it's single bins. Mostly it's pretty close. Like that one kind of sucks. Like we just ran out of space downstairs, and so it's upstairs.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, and we're hoping to move in the next few months.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been threatening to for a while. We need to move. So that should let us fix it, hopefully, maybe.
Yeah.
It's going to cause some other issues, but...
Minor disruption.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, interesting. We built those carts, those setup carts.
Yeah.
I mentioned a while back, and now all of a sudden they're just getting used for everything. We're like, we need more of these
to move stuff around, or everything like setups.
Well, all the setups for sure, but also to move things around as like temporary workstations.
Yeah.
Like if you're like deburring, or often like someone will like roll one over, put the packing paper on top of it, pack parts right on it.
Fascinating.
Which
That's
maybe
cool.
is an indication that we are needing horizontal space in certain areas, but also it just seems like they just work and don't require a dedicated horizontal space and don't collect stuff in the same way. So it's just been kind of interesting to see.
That is interesting. Not to say that this is at all a good idea, but what I've enjoyed, and I wonder what I've enjoyed about MakerPipe is that we can sort of build something super basic. Like we have a sort of standard work cell table thing
Yeah.
that we've built quite a few of. And then inevitably they sort of end up getting a little bit specialized, which obviously flies in the face of standardization.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, like I wonder if I wonder if people would specialize things for like a wrapping station that is movable and on wheel anyway, or not, or maybe that's the answer and just have more of them that are standard across setups, or
I don't know. It was just
things.
like a curiosity.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, this is also super basic, but awesome. We've been adding more clips for Kanban. I thought we were using Kanban for the past 3 years. Now we're using Kanban. And even in doing that, I'm like, oh, we're not really using Kanban. So like, there's a bunch of different types of Kanban Toyota uses, like transportation Kanban and whatever, work, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand why transportation Kanban would be useful. But now we have, this is a dumb example, but it's real. We have gloves in our paint department. If you need more gloves, right now it is on the operator to stop what they're doing, walk over to our shelf where we keep all the gloves and get more gloves. If you think about that, that's not a good system, right?
Sure.
We should have enough to continue working uninterrupted, and it should trigger a card to replenish the stock
at the
outside of the kind of tack time of the station. Not that we're that refined that tack time is the consideration, but I think disruptions are really expensive.
Yeah.
So like I would love to trigger a card that says move a box of gloves from our general storage into our paint department.
Sure.
And just having that dialed.
A buffer pulling from a buffer that gets pulled from purchasing. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
That is it.
We updated our packing slip template. So I think I mentioned a while ago that we added certificate of conformance language to our packing slips. The downside of that is that now our packing slips have to be very well suited to whatever the purchase order requirements are in terms of documentation.
Oh, interesting.
So sometimes we're having requirements for serial numbers, whatever
on the parts.
Yeah, different rev numbers, all that kind of stuff. That all now needs to be carried on the packing slip, versus prior it could just be like what it is and how many.
Because the language is on there?
Because the language is saying this very specific thing is what this very specific thing is supposed to be.
Okay.
So you have to be
very specific.
Very specific.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's been an interesting challenge to try and figure out a template that works across the board for everyone's requirements. But we're getting there, and now we have a template.
Nice.
So
Standardization.
I
think that's basically standardization.
Seems to be a theme.
It sure does.
That's all I got.
Same.
Good place to wrap up. Thanks everybody for listening and coming along on the journey. Hopefully we're not just getting boring beating over the head with standardization. But we're having a great time.
Yep.
You can find me on Instagram at @Lycan_MFG. on the web at likeandprecision.com, and the podcast Patreon on Patreon.
And then the podcast Instagram is incremental CI. And you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com and arda.cards. If you want to schedule a demo, please reach out, and be back next week.
Talk to you soon.